and I've been through periods where I've really emotionally invested myself in a project and it fell through, and you feel heartbroken. So much of making movies is, and I say this a lot, of like, it feels like you're in love with something that doesn't love you back. And I've recently discovered that I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go in the journey as much as I can and learn as much as I can and not wait for the green light, because no matter what, it's a rewarding process. You learn so much, and it'll go somewhere, whether it's in that project or not.
Welcome to Zinemaldia podcast, the audio inventory of some of the events taking place at the San Sebastián Film Festival.
Buenas tardes y bienvenidos.
Thank you so much for being here. We are going to be talking to Gia Coppola, director of Pilot, Alto, Mainstream, and The Last Showgirl, which received the special jury prize last year in this film festival. And all through the meeting, we'll be talking to her about her beginnings. She started, with video clips, short films, and she will be telling us about the creation process. You will be able to ask questions. We will be talking in English, so if you need simultaneous translation, please go ahead.
Thank you, Gia, for being here with us this evening. I would like to start asking you, what were your beginnings in the audiovisual field? What do you remember? And if it was like being a director, something that you wanted from your early age?
I feel like I always kind of was too intimidated to be a director, given my family background, but it was always around me. And I'm a shy person, and I didn't really excel in school, so I gravitated towards photography because I could just be an observer and look, take pictures, and technically it was interesting. And so I kind of followed that path, and then I went to college for it, and I had a wonderful professor. His name is Stephen Shore, who's a wonderful photographer himself, and he really taught me to just love art, and that anything can kind of inspire you. At the time he was really intrigued by an eBay photograph, and like how the intention behind it was just it was very pure. And to appreciate books and movies. And so from there, I started to want to challenge myself more, and filmmaking feels like an extension of photography. It has more narrative to it, and it's more collaborative with other people. And so I was interested in it, and I just would start making little films with my friends who went to film school, and we'd do like fashion projects where a company would loan us like $1,000, and they're like, as long as the character wears the clothing, you can make your video, and that allowed us to really play and experiment. And that, I think from that, I got the opportunity to do Palo Alto. I ran into James Franco in a very kismet way, where we kept kind of seeing each other, and he knew my photography, and he was like, I would love to work with you. And here's a few different opportunities, and one of them is you can adapt a short story in my book. And I adapted the whole book, and I made a test film with all of my friends as a way to kind of get the job. And he liked it, and we had a very, a small budget, and we made a movie. And I think because I went into it in a very naive way of not thinking about the sort of external outcome, where would this movie live? I was just sort of making it with all the people I was familiar with. Was really fulfilling, and so that was sort of my path.
Great, and I know that you have worked like in different experiments in a way. For example, the Seven Faces of Shame, that it was like an exquisite corpse, and also Strange Love, like this experiment by Vice. How was this process of doing like an exquisite corpse with different directors and being able to do a movie out of it?
That was really my uncle's sort of conception. He does a lot of work in the commercial industry, and a lot of filmmakers, myself included, to pay the bills. You do commercials, and then you can do your film projects on the side. And this was like his sort of concept of, well, commercials get these budgets and you make something for 30 seconds. Wouldn't it be interesting if we took a commercial budget and actually made a movie out of it and give all these other directors an opportunity to make a movie, and do it in this sort of exquisite corpse idea? And it was really fun. We did this kind of raffle of like, you had to pick what setting you wanted, what was your sort of conflict, and then out of all the different sort of cards that you drew, you had to come up with a short story with the one actress throughout the whole film. It didn't quite work, because I don't think everyone played by the rules, where you had to, you have to kind of leave the tail, the legs for the next person, and I don't think anyone really tried to connect it as much. They were changing costumes and daylight, and it was, but it was a fun experiment, and I think in general I'm always trying to take an opportunity and find a way to educate myself in the medium. How can I make it enjoyable, even though it's work? What is the sort of emotional learning experience I'm gaining, or technical experience that I'm gaining, and try to take myself out of it as much as possible.
And going back to Palo Alto that you mentioned, how was the casting process for all these different characters that came written in this book of James Franco? How was like finding each one of the characters?
With Palo Alto, I remember I was auditioning all these teenage actors, and none of them really felt real. They were all actors, and I remember Jack Kilmer as a kid, because he went to the same elementary school as I did, and I brought him in, and he was just a real kid. He was a surfer. He likes writing music, and he was wonderful because he was just so naturally himself. And I remember the casting director said to me, like, well, good luck getting him to set on time, because he was just like, showed up late to the audition. And I even remember I had him audition with my friend, and during his audition, a giant cockroach was just scaling the walls, and he was just like focusing on that. But it was kind of amazing because he wasn't thinking about his lines as much, and he was just sort of obsessed with watching this cockroach go across the wall. And yeah, I was just advised, like, how can I get him comfortable with this idea of like soon a camera is going to be pointing at him, and how can I know that he can take on the sort of a lead role of a movie. And so I just followed him around like it was a documentary, so he was always used to like that presence. And him and Nat Wolff lived in my mom's basement, and so they really created a dynamic, and it felt, yeah, just trying to always foster authenticity and realness. And I had another actress at the time, and it didn't feel right. And so then I remembered meeting Emma Roberts, and she always came on a little too strong for me, but then I met her, and she was so emphatic about doing it and even though she was a bit older than the other kids, she knew from an objective point of view of those teenager feelings. So I think it was really helpful to have her kind of guide the two boys.
Your next movie, Mainstream, is super different from this coming of age. What was like the creative process behind it, and why did you decide to do this movie?
Yeah, with Mainstream, I was in my late 20s, and I had just seen on Turner Classic Movie Face in the Crowd, and it really impacted me just how relevant it felt about our culture and what we value. And I was feeling a lot of that in my own relationship to the world with the internet and what gets valued when and feeling like a very introverted person. How do you operate in a world that I think really emboldens extroverts? And I was sort of grappling with just that kind of feeling, and how do I take something that feels so cyber and unattractive and put it into a cinematic landscape. And yeah, it was very challenging to make that movie, but I learned so much that was really important for me.
And how did you approach like this to direct these actors? Like, if you, for example, do some workshops in order like to create these characters, or you just talk with them, or you go straight to rehearsals? How do you approach like the acting field when you go into this movie?
With Mainstream?
Yes.
Well, I mean, that project, I was really grappling with all the things I was sort of expressing, and I met Andrew Garfield in an acting class. I was sort of know his acting coach, and I knew I wanted him for the part because he's always such like a charming, nice guy, and then to see him play kind of more of a villain would make it more empathetic with an audience. You'd understand that lore. And he's such a wonderful, intelligent human being, and so I really wanted his guidance and like how can we kind of shape this narrative, this character, and then you know with Maya we did a reading, and it just really felt like there's our Frankie, and so it kind of came together in that way.
I'm thinking about the time gaps between this first movie and the second one. Do you feel like as a director you have a need like to go into the life and experience things in order to have like this baggage to tell the stories, or why do you think this gap happened?
I think I was raised very bohemian, and I'm not I don't feel very part of like the Hollywood system where you make movies for movies' sake. I feel like I've been raised to you know, follow your heart and make things that you feel connected to. And so I was really just in the process of writing and trying to you know, there opportunities came around of like, oh, you can make the big budget version of Palo Alto and make it cleaner, and you know, and that was the reason why I made Palo Alto, was like because I wanted a movie about teenagers that felt real, where they're not in like clean Converse and you know, cool vintage clothes, or you know, the movies that I love, like The Last Picture Show, or what's the other one I love? Over the Edge, and so yeah, I was just sort of letting myself get inspired of what I wanted to tell.
And what do you think with these two movies were like the challenges you had to affront when doing independent cinema?
I think the challenge for me was you know, Palo Alto we made very small, and it was with all the sort of interns at my uncle's office, or my friends, or my family, and then with Mainstream, I had to deal with a bit more business, and unions, and I can't hire this person, and so after that experience, I think I wanted to go back to what I felt close to with Palo Alto. Is like, I want to just keep it small. I don't want to wait around for the financing to come, and it's such a struggle. If I keep it small, then I don't have the same pressure, and I can have more creative autonomy. And so with Showgirl, I was talking to my cousin Robert Schwartzman, who I've been making like little home movies with when we were kids. We'd make these like short horror films. And it was like, well, doesn't it only seem natural that we'd make a movie together? He now has a distribution company called Utopia, and they were just forming a production unit. So he was like, if you can make it small, then like we don't have to wait around. And I remembered I was talking to my cousin during COVID. Robert's older brother, Matthew Shire. It's going to get complicated now because I have a very big family and there's a lot of them, different members. But Matthew was talking to me. I was talking to him about Showgirls. I don't know why. I think I loved the Pete Vanderhoven movie, and I was saying like, oh, wouldn't that be a really cool remake? And he's like, it's funny you mention that because his wife, Kate Gersten, wrote a play about this time that she, after college, observed these showgirls at the Jubilee, and it's a mother-daughter story. And I remember I took it, it sat on my desk, but then when Robert and I years later were talking about really wanting to just go make a movie, I was like, well, what about this play? And I picked it up and I read it, and I was like totally in love with it because I was raised by a single mom, and it was such an interesting world to get to know. I didn't understand showgirls in that context, like the real context of what an art form it is and how complicated it is. And I love Las Vegas. I've always loved Las Vegas. I would go there since college years and go and take photographs. And so I was always hungry for the right story where I could kind of use that landscape, and it was all right in front of me.
I wonder if anyone wants to make a question at this moment. If someone wants to do a question, just raise your hand. There's someone in the back.
Thank you, Gia, for being here. You mentioned finding ways to have fun in order to be able to make films. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? And was there ever a time where you didn't have fun at all?
Yeah, when I make a commercial, you're really kind of a director for hire, but I'm not emotionally invested, so I'm sort of like, I'll take the path of least frustration and be like, okay, whatever you want. You want the person to walk that way, and and it's really the challenge and learning experience for me in those moments are, how do I articulate my argument to win my battle of like what I want creatively? And I think in anything I do, I'm trying to find what am I going to learn out of this? What do I get to take away from this experience? And I think when I had my son, he's 2 now, and I was so happy to go to work in a different way where anything that was challenging also felt really fun. It wasn't scary, because the scary things in life are like making sure that my family is happy and healthy. But to have the opportunity to work in this way is such I'm so grateful to be able to be creative as my occupation, and so to find the joy in that, and especially with acting. I mean, theater, you call it a play, so like make it fun for your actors, for yourself, for your crew. It's not always going to be that way, but if you can try to view challenges as a puzzle, I'm like, okay, how can I solve this? Or if an actor is being doesn't want to do what you think is the right idea, then maybe like how can you find the right language to communicate so that you guys can get on the same page, or and you become a little bit like I also find it like therapy for myself and for everyone, of like what's the medicine of what I'm trying to get at here, and yeah, I find that really rewarding and therefore fun.
Thank you for your question. I wonder if anyone else wants to make a question. There's someone raising the hand over here.
Hi, Gia. Showgirls was such a beautiful film, and congratulations on that. I feel that you single-handedly revived Pamela Anderson's career. Do you see yourself working with her again, or indeed Jamie Lee?
Both of those women are incredible in very different ways. Pamela is so inspiring in how she just lives life authentically. And I think aside from getting the opportunity, I feel like so lucky that I got to have this opportunity to work with her and just get to know her as a human being, because she's just a wonderful person. And Jamie is a total force. Like, I was very intimidated to get to work with this actor that just came off winning an Academy Award, and I was like, there's no way she's going to want to do this like small movie in Las Vegas. But she's such a lover of independent film, and she was also very excited to have the opportunity to get to work with Pamela, that it was really eye-opening to me to see someone of that legend kind of work in the confines of our kind of guerrilla filmmaking. She was moving gear around and sits on set the whole time, and is so generous to all the other actors with the performance. So I learned so much just sort of being in her presence. So I would love to find a way. I always had a fantasy that the sequel to The Last Showgirl would be Shelley and Annette go rob a casino, and it's now a heist film.
Anyone else would like to make a question?
Hi. I was curious about, you mentioned starting with a very low budget film and then going to a more industrial or more commercial kind of production, and then going back to that more guerrilla style of filmmaking. And I was curious, in that journey you've made, what skills or approaches or mindsets you've found more useful or enriching to be able to successfully do those cheaper films, both creatively but also in the more logistical of just having it finished.
I think what I discovered works for me, and it's not necessarily for everyone, but what makes me confident is to be around people I feel close to, and that I can feel, I can have a real fun, I hate that I keep saying fun, but I can have a real back and forth collaboration with, that they can say, that idea sucks, but how about this? And I can say, no, that sucks, but how about this? And have that kind of sparring. And those people tend to be like, my production designer is my friend from high school. The cinematographer, Autumn Durald, has now gone off to become extremely successful, but Palo Alto was one of her first movies. And my mom did the costumes. One of my aunts was my script supervisor. My cousin was the producer. My other cousin was the writer. And so to work with people that I love and I know love me, and we all just want to support each other and like be of service to the movie, it felt like it took any sort of ego out of it. And therefore we were able to like operate really fast. Like, we made Showgirl in 18 days, and I shot it on film, and therefore like those choices with film, you can't be wasteful with your shots. You have to, because film is money, time is money, so you have to be really concise about how many takes. And I think, everyone was in on the cause, so we all kind of hustled together. Like I said, Jamie was moving lights if we had to keep moving fast, and Pamela was down to just run around Las Vegas even after the day of shooting to just get extra bits. She was of service to the movie, and finding people in that kind of like-mindedness really worked, and it allowed it to be very intimate. So I had no video village where people could go and look at monitor and then be an additional voice in your head. I think for a director, the voice in your head is really sacred and you have to protect that. And so I just had a little clamshell, and I was the only person with a monitor able to sort of see what we were making. And that was how I protected my voice.
Thank you for giving this talk today. I actually watched Last Showgirl as my last movie at last year's film festival here, and it was really a breath of fresh air. And I wanted to ask you if everybody that was cast was your first choice, or who else did you consider to put in that movie?
Well, that's a dangerous question. But with making movies, sometimes you go after certain actors and you don't, they reject you, and then you realize by the end of the day, the person that is in your film, it sort of was always meant to be that. But Shelley on the page was such a unique character. When I would read her, because she's such a nostalgic character, you kind of envision like a Marilyn Monroe. But I couldn't. No one felt right. And then my cousin Matt Shire Pamela's documentary had just come out, and he was like, "I know who your Shelley is. Watch Pamela's documentary." And you could see from that, like, not only is she an extremely interesting person, but that she was really craving to, show herself creatively as an actor. And she's extremely well-read and such a cinephile that she was just like a well of all of this creativity that was ready to come out. And so I trusted her. And when I went to try to cast her, I got turned down within an hour. So I knew that she didn't get a hold of the script, and then I had to find another way. And I'm so grateful that I was able to get in touch with her son, and he put the script in her hands. And then when he was like, "Good news, she loves it," and we talked right away, and she was like, so emphatic of like, "I need this part," and I'm like, "But you have the part. I've been trying to get in touch with you." I think Showgirl was just one of those really special experiences where it came together because we were so fast. I think that also lends maybe more opportunity for actors to just kind of easily come and go. Dave Bautista was an actor that I've really wanted to work with for a long time. I'd met him 7 years ago, and similar, we were just talking because I said I love the Guardians of the Galaxy, and he was saying how he really wants to do more dramatic roles. And then when this project came along, I was like, he would be really interesting. And he's a busy action star, so the struggle was like making sure it worked within his schedule, and he moved mountains to make sure that he could be a part of the. I think it cost him money to be in The Last Showgirl, but I was so happy because he was really such a heart and soul of the film.
You recently mentioned your DOP, Autumn Dural. I wonder how has it been, this collaboration through the years, because the 3 movies you have made have really different aesthetics and visuals. So I wonder how was the process working with her?
When I made Palo Alto with my friends, I did it with just like a 5D camera, and there was this other DP that I was working with, but then he had to go off and do like second unit for Oliver Stone, and then he's like, "So my friend's gonna sub in for me and finish the the film for you? And it was Autumn. And then I was like, and sort of the guarantee that I gave the first DP was that if he did this little short film project for me, I'd let him do the final version. But then Autumn came along, and I was like, never mind, I'm going to go with her. And she and I, she's my best friend. We talk every day, pretty much, and we can be real with each other. I call her the cactus because she can be so mean, but she protects me in that way too, because she can be mean to everyone else, but she gets me what I want. I advise people to get themselves a cactus in their crew. But I'm so happy for her because she's been doing this for so long, and as a female DP and a female mother DP, like she has her son, and like just how to operate in the industry as a female mother is so complicated, and I trust her wholeheartedly. Like I think for me, because I have a photography background, I'm less concerned about the visuals. So I'm just like, you go do your thing. Maybe I have an idea here or there. And I'm more trying to, figure out my story and work with the actors. But I'll have little things here and there, like with Showgirl, I was like, I really want to make this film, and everyone, even my cousin who's the producer, was like, are you sure you want to do that? Because digital is so much more safe, and like you only have these actors for a few days. And Autumn, my cactus, was like, no, you said you wanted film, we're gonna do film. I'll threaten to walk off this movie unless you do film. And I was like, okay. And she's like, it's actually not that risky, not riskier than digital. It's just you have to know what you're doing. And I'm so grateful that she advocated for me in that way. And then she designed these incredible lenses. She's like, well, it should be anamorphic, and I'm going to add this, special design to it so that it kind of warps on the sides and it feels dreamy, but you also hyper focus on your characters. And so when you find the people that you trust, it makes it very effortless.
And thinking about the editing of your films, are you someone who enjoys being like in the editing room all the time, or you need to take like some space in order to have a better sight of the materials and then you go back to the editing?
Yeah, normally, because I'm on independent films, I don't have the luxury of like going and coming back everyone's like, hit the ground running, like we only have a certain amount of weeks, we got to get this done. And it's unfortunate because I am of the nature where I need to let things breathe, but it's also, editing is so lonely. I don't like it as much. You're in a dark room all day. You're just looking at all of the things that and you feel reminded of the things that you didn't get, rather than looking at the things that you did have, and you have to like reframe your mind of like, okay, this is what I have. This is how I'm going to make it come together. So it's a really kind of disheartening feeling at first, because you're just like, shit, this is, I have to figure out how to put this all together. And you're like months of just like watching these people that you had this tribe with, and then they go off and do other movies, and then you're still like in this like the same zone of like, hey, remember that experience? But everyone's like having new experiences, and yeah. So for me, yeah, I don't know. It's more the journey of getting to have the camaraderie with everyone, and then it's very fulfilling when it's done. But then it's sort of weird because you're like, it's over.
And you have worked in the sets of films of your different family members. Do you feel that being part of their teams have also influenced you, the way you direct, the way you work in films?
Yeah, I mean, it has its pros and cons. I mean, I'm so fortunate that I get to be an observer of all these incredible filmmakers, and I have wonderful people to turn to for advice. But at the same time, they're all very talented filmmakers that have their own opinions of how they would make a movie. So you like again have to like be like, but what is me? What is how would I go about it? And I've learned so much, like with my aunt, seeing her not only just being a woman and really trailblazing the path for women as filmmakers, but to do it in a way that's true to her personality, and that you don't have to be, you know, like my grandpa, who's like a big male presence that like powers through, who does it that's true to his personality. And you know, and I've learned from him, like being on his set, I remember the most, you know, you're always learning very valuable things, and he's extremely intelligent and wise. But, and I was working on behind the scenes for his movie Twixt. I had just finished college, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went to bartending school, and then I was like, okay, I'll do this job where I just follow my grandfather around and film him making his movie, because my grandma didn't want to be behind the scenes that time. And it was so great to have this time with my grandpa where I just was by his side every day and night. And I remember he was tired from a day of work and didn't want to drive home, and we were filming in Napa, and so he was like, you drive home. But I get in the car, it's a stick shift car, a manual. I've never driven manual before. The light is going, the sun is going down, and it's a windy mountainous road, and I'm starting to drive, and the gas tank light starts flashing, and I'm like panicking and freaking out, and he's just sitting back laughing, being like, well, wouldn't it be funny if like all of a sudden a deer just went in front of the car? And I'm like stressing out. But the lesson he was trying to teach me is that, like, don't worry until it's actually really time for worrying, and even then, you know, there's always going to be sort of a solution. So I think being in either, you know, and my grandma too, like she was a wonderful artist and very always teaching us that art is all around us. It doesn't have to be in a museum, you know, it's the way you perceive things, and there's beauty everywhere. So I feel like every family member, I've learned so much from them.
I wonder if anyone wants to make a question. Yes.
Oh, again, I'm sorry.
Just listening to you, I love how you talk about the family, the aunts, the uncles, the cousins, your grandpa, and you all cross-pollinate each other's projects. And I've talked to Jason several times over the years, and he's just the same, referencing all the family. But I have to ask, none of you guys work with Nicholas.
Oh, well, my grandpa has, but I would love to work with him. He's just so busy. But I mean, he's one of my favorite actors. I would love to work with him.
Yeah, thank you for coming so much. I just want to ask about, like, you're talking about some low-budget filmmaking and following your heart. How does this kind of filmmaking affect the pre-production stage? Like, do you have more time to, you know, to contemplate, to think, or it's more strict? Because you mostly talked about post-production, that you like about editing, but what about the pre-production stage? Does it give more artistic freedom, or it's vice versa?
It definitely has. Well, there's different phases. Like the writing phase, you know, is when you can really dream and you don't have anything holding you back. And just, so that is rewarding in that kind of way. But I've been also lately, like, I used to really hold back during the pre-production phase, because I would be so scared of it not happening. And I've been through periods where I've really emotionally invested myself in a project, and it fell through. And you feel heartbroken. So much of making movies is, and I say this a lot, of like, it feels like you're in love with something that doesn't love you back. And I've recently discovered that I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go in the journey as much as I can and learn as much as I can and not wait for the green light, because no matter what, it's a rewarding process. You learn so much, and it'll go somewhere, whether it's in that project or not. And you know, we focus so much on like how to make movies, but what about like the why? Like what is so healing about the story that you want to tell? What are you gaining out of uncovering this material? What do you want the people to feel? And follow those impulses really takes me outside of myself and you know, the sort of external part of movie making. There was another story once where I think it was Bergman was talking about what is movie making, and there was this guy that gets, you know, an opportunity from the king to make a wheel, and he gets so excited, like, I get to make a wheel for the king, and so I'm going to make the best wheel possible, and he's going to give me so much money. And so he presents the wheel to the king, and the king is like, no, it's not right. And he then goes back and he tries to make the wheel, and he's like, I'm going to make this wheel because the king is going to love it so much, and then I'm going to become famous. He gives it to the king, and the king says, no, that's not right. And he goes through all these ideas of why he's going to make the wheel and what he's going to get in return. But then, after so many rejections, he finally makes a wheel just to make a wheel. And that's when the king was like, yeah, this is right. And I always think about that. Like, I'm just going to make the wheel. Like, I'm going to take everything out of it and just make the wheel.
Hi, hello. What is the latest thing you've learned as a filmmaker? Latest thing you have learned as a filmmaker?
The latest thing I feel as a film?
No, you learned. Like, you discovered something recently.
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, it might have been just what I said. Like, it seems so obvious to not think about the how and think more about the why. And I definitely have done that. But to really put more, to kind of have it said that simply to me, and really just not worry until there's you know, the green light, to just make, to always be kind of in that process of feeding yourself is what it's about. You know, I don't know, I've learned so many things. You know, you have to learn to make friends with anxiety and worry. And I don't know, I feel like there's some technical thing that always, you know, is new to me.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. I have a question about when you have a disagreement with the actors about how to act, how to acting, how do you deal with this situation?
I feel like, I don't know. I mean, I feel like actors, for me, acting, I'm so fascinated by, because I'm so afraid of it. I feel like that is the last thing I would ever want to do, is like have to be in front of a bunch of people and like pretend to be something. It's really scary, but I'm always trying to get to know it better so that I can be more helpful and a better director for them. And so I really value the actor's input. I think they become the character, so to follow their lead. And I have some ideas of what I think, but also to be open, and also to recognize if an actor, is coming out of their own fear, or what is the root of what, the character, what is the root of what they're saying, if you disagree with it or not. And that's sort of also what this craft is about, is like what is the base of all of these these choices, these people, where do we come from? The bigger life questions.
What do you usually do when you face writer's block?
Well, now I don't like to write, so I just have a writer do it. But I think we always have our, the voice that makes us insecure. My grandma used to call it the radio station, F-U-C-K, fuck you. And like you have to turn down that radio station in your head. And I think over time, as I've gotten older, I've gotten better. Now that I'm a parent, it's like I don't have time to be as self-critical. It's like any little spare moment I have to myself is like when it kind of takes you out of like overthinking. I remember my grandma, was always so impressed of like, she was a woman in the 70s and even then it was like you didn't get to have the same opportunities that women today do. I used to complain about some job opportunity and she's like, you're so lucky. I didn't get to do that. I had to be a mom of 3 and like write on napkins at the dinner table at the the diner to like get my creativity out. And so yeah, I think if you're feeling writer's block, just go have a beer if you drink, or spend time with your friends, get into life, go on a walk, be a part of the world, is what works for me.
And I wonder, Gia, talking about the Last Showgirl, like how has it been like filming in these spaces, these casinos that work in the real life and have their own schedules? How hard was working with these real locations?
Well, I had done a short film in a casino and I knew that they're really, really strict, so that was going to be a major hurdle. Like I proposed this script as like a way to like make a movie intimately, and then I realized as we were making it, like actually it's really complicated. You have these costumes that you can't recreate because it just would make the movie look bad. And so we were very fortunate that we got access to the actual showgirl pieces that were made by Bob Mackie and Pete Menefee, and they're like museum pieces. They have not left the building in 30 years. They're extremely heavy. They can be up to 60, 80 pounds, and they're not designed for you to be wearing for long periods of time. These women would dance for like 60 seconds on the stage and then, shuffle off and then take it right off. So the actors were like trying to lean their heads because, we don't have time for them to take things on and off. So there were certain challenges that just weren't conducive to actually the movie format, but you find a window at a casino on their not peak hours that allow you to film. And I remember going to the casino at 6 a.m, and there's music always playing in a casino. It's sensory overload. There's weird smells. And you go to this casino, we were working out of the Rio casino, and they had what you called bevertainers, because as a sort of union loophole, if you were an entertainer and a waitress, then you didn't have to give them waiter. They didn't have to be a part of the union for waiters. And so it was, you see these people drinking beer, and then the waiter goes up on this podium and she starts dancing, and I see Jamie Lee Curtis like in awe of trying to do research for her character, and was like, wow, look how talented she is, she's dancing. And I took that as like, oh, do you want to do that for your character? And she's like, no. And I guess I thought I took that as a yes. She thought I was, but then later, because all the music was playing, we heard Total Eclipse of the Heart, and she said, wouldn't that be interesting if Total Eclipse of the Heart was Annette's song? And so then day one, I was like, okay, now it's your time to get on the podium and do your dance. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, will you just do it? And she's like, you're going to make me dance? And I was like, yes, please. And so she does it to Total Eclipse of the Song at Heart, and it was amazing. It was one take, totally on a whim. And I was like, now I have to find a way to get access to this song because this moment was so incredible. And that was the story of that. And, Casino, we only had like an hour on the casino floor in total. But I also knew, not to digress, but that because I was such a lover of Las Vegas and I would always go take photos, that I felt like no one ever really represented Vegas in the way that I wanted to see it. And that was like exploring it in the daytime. What is it like to live there? And so it wasn't so much about like the casinos and the nightlife. Like I wanted to just see the real day-to-day.
And also, I wonder, how do you feel after like this fantastic reception that the movie has had in festival and also in the awards? That do you feel that this has opened like more windows, doors for you to keep doing movies?
I hope so. I think, I have a lot of like almost kind of sadness because I loved working with all of those women, and I loved working with those costumes and Las Vegas. And it's like, I don't know what world I want to live in next. It's hard to beat that. I just want to go back and redo that movie again. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. America's crazy.
Sí, voy a hacerla en
I'm
castellano.
going to ask in Spanish. You were talking about experimenting about low-budget movies. You were talking about experimenting about low-budget movies. We've been working for 18 years around a proposal with a big director, your grandpa, Francis Coppola, about live cinema.
Yeah, I remember when he was writing that book, and I would go with him to observe the soap operas like Young and the Restless, where they basically kind of operate in a live way. Or we would see, what else did we see? Dancing with the Stars, where there's multi-cameras and then you go in the booth and you have to edit live. And I thought it was really inspiring. And I tried to do a music video in that with those live camera setup, but I didn't have enough time to really practice and do a live edit. But I think technically it's such an incredible craft, and my uncle Roman is really good at it. And I know my grandfather wanted to do live cinema with One from the Heart, and he still says, he doesn't have any regrets in life, but that he still would like to try to do live cinema. So hopefully.
Gia, thank you for your first film, Palo Alto. I happened to watch them 2 months ago, and I have two questions about this film, two parts. I was impressed by your understanding of masculinity, psychology, and man psychology. I expect to meet this in Safdie film, for example, but where you find your understanding of man walls? It's a research or from your life? And second question, for me, this film, it's when I watched them, and it was like spirit of 90s, like I watched film of Greg Araki, for example. And this film, for me, is a relic of 90s freedom, very expressive, very wild, very brave, speaking about sexuality and other. And this film was before the 3 years before the beginning of Me Too process. And can you imagine that you can show this film in this time today? Before I think it's very brave for this time after this all came of new ethics and other. Thank you.
Thank you. I think if I'm answering your question right, that for me, I'm always trying to understand the characters, even though I might not have that exact experience. Why are they doing what they're doing? What is their internal logic? What do you think their history is that got them to this place? And to never, I think it's to never judge, even if you don't agree with what they're doing, even if what they're doing is bad, but to just sort of try to see it from their perspective. And I think that's what makes, the craft interesting to me is who are all of these characters at their core? How can I understand them? Where do I relate? Where do I not relate? And asking yourself those questions is what makes it educating. And I think you were asking, like, could Palo Alto exist in a time like today? I think so, because even though there's a whole other dynamic of social media and the internet, I was inspired by movies that I loved, as I mentioned before, The Last Picture Show and Over the Edge or Outsiders or Virgin Suicides, like the movies that are really just about being a teenager and that vulnerable time in your life. I think is a universal feeling, no matter what age or what generation you're from. That feeling of aimlessness, of wearing your heart on your sleeve, I don't think ever really changes. Someone was saying the other day of the youth is wasted on the young, and it's I think we all have a different perspective as we get older, what that time represents. Even if you have all different sort of circumstances, and if you're in a totally different place, that vulnerability of feeling in between, of no longer being a child and not being viewed as an adult and feeling like you're capable of being an adult, I think that's just part of human nature. I wonder if you were a caveman back in the day, if it felt the same.
Hi, it's me again. I want to ask, what kind of film do you think is the good films? I think some films tells a story, have an ending, and tells some tells a story, but some films doesn't tell us, has an open ending, and the storyline is not very obvious. So what kind do you think is better?
I love all movies. I feel like it's so hard to make a movie, and it's so easy to judge. But then when you think about how hard it is to actually do, you have to have more perspective and realize what an achievement that is. But that being said, I think I love when movies, it's a medium that's magic. It transports you. It's travel. So when I can feel like I'm dropped into a world that I didn't know anything about, and really feel like it feels real to me, authentic, so yeah, sometimes it's just, I'm a very instinctual person, so it's hard for me to describe what just all of a sudden compels me. You see a movie and you start crying, but how do you articulate what that was that moved you? But I think if everyone comes from a personal place of what makes them unique and their, transport people into something that they might not understand, are always usually very interesting. And I like action, I like thriller, I like horror, I like art films, I like it all.
And Gia, do you feel that you have like a specific guides, like painters or directors that have guided through your whole career, that people you admire and that you feel like you are connected in a way of the way they make films or the way they inspire you?
I think what got me like really into movies, I remember when I saw Zodiac for the first time in the movie theater at college, and I was just like, whoa, that is a cool movie. And so like I love all the classics and I know those movies and I think they're legendary, but I think what made me like a film nerd was like the Paul Thomas Andersons, the David Finchers, the sort of more modern generation of movie makers, and seeing them today like get to make original films on large scales, but they still feel adventurous. I mean, and having this opportunity now and being on the jury and watching all these movies has just been so inspiring. So, you know, I don't know. I feel like we're always in this position to sort of define like what is you, but I really struggle with that. Of like I just am defined by my instincts and my experiences. I don't feel like I have a distinct style, but maybe it feels differently to an outsider.
And for the last question, I wonder if you have like any advice for these young filmmakers that are part of the Nest section and other filmmakers that are here, that they are doing short films and going into length films, like if you have something you have learned over the years that you would like to share with them.
I like the motto that I learned of use the tools at hand. Like you don't need some person with a fancy resume. You don't need some famous actor. You don't need, you know, some fancy camera. Like tell stories and try to find an interesting way to, you know, that Hitchcock said it's not oh, the man walks through the door, but how does the man walk through the door? Like how can you convey that compositionally in a way that's unique, or challenge yourself in that way? And I look at like Sean Baker, who, you know, made Tangerine on a cell phone, and it's incredible. Like, so we're of a time period where we have a lot of technology at our disposal that we can make stories if we want to. And if you're in a, you know, film school, what a privilege, because you have a community at your disposal who know how to do a lot of things and be wonderful collaborators. You know, I think for directing too, like every other division gets a lot of opportunities for practice, and directors, you know, don't get that as much. So doing even just plays with your friends, I wish I did more of that, and maybe I still will. Or find modes to just constantly kind of work on that muscle, I think is something that I would like to do.
Thank you, Gia, for being here. It's been a pleasure. A big applause for Gia.
Thank you. Thank you.